Welcome to a special episode of Wrestling with Computers, the show where we talk about technology. We've got a special show today. We're going to talk about the new tech tax and how it affects businesses across the state. We've got a great roundtable discussion with a bunch of great members. We've got Representative Vinnie DiMacedo, Representative Susan Gifford, Representative Daniel Vieira, and Representative Randy Hunt. That's David Vieira, sorry. And we've also got Dennis Hanks, Executive Director of Plymouth Area Chamber of Commerce and Plymouth Regional Economic Development Foundation. We've got Lauren Backen from Backen CPA, and we've got Peter Winston, CEO of Integrated Computer Solutions, and Chris Fava, Software Engineer. Thank you all for coming. We're here to discuss the new tech tax, which came about with Bill H3535. Vinny, could you just explain the bill and the tax to us a little bit, what it's about and what it pertains?
Well, the genesis of the tax is the governor, when he put together his $1.9 billion tax package, this was part of his legislation to raise revenue, along with a whole host of other taxes. As many people know, the debate that was happening on Beacon Hill started to center around more about the fact that the legislature wasn't going to adopt his $1.9 billion tax package, but they kind of ignored the fact that they were still doing a $500 million plus tax, and so it didn't get the attention. And I know that you reached out to me about what's with the software tax, because you didn't hear about it. Well, I can tell you, my colleagues here at this table were fighting. We went up and down on the floor, concerned about the implications of this tax, and the fact that there was a lot of ambiguity in this particular tax, and it didn't seem to resonate. It is now resonating because the implications of the tax are actually coming into play. And now you're starting to see a lot more people concerned about this because they're finding out about it. So what we're hoping to do here in this roundtable, as far as my GOP colleagues here, is to get the word out, let people know what's happening, and start to get into a position where we can educate people on what's happening, understand how this is going to affect businesses, how this is going to affect the tax code, and hopefully get this thing repealed. So that's kind of where we're at as far as my colleagues here, who worked very hard to fight this thing, voted against it, but we weren't successful. It was a party line vote. But I think things are starting to change, and I'm hopeful that it's going to start right here.
Yeah, and if I could just read a couple articles out of the Boston Globe. Businesses shouldn't be required to guess what they must pay on taxes. Yet that's exactly where Massachusetts software services industry finds itself several weeks after state legislators passed a bill to put a 6.25% sales tax on computer system services to fund the transportation tax. And also, Massachusetts now has the highest tax on computer and software services in the country. Just 3 other states tax such services, and none of them are more than 4%. And finally, if those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it, then a number of legislators should be looking over their shoulders, wondering whether their time in the office is near an end. That's what happened in 1990 when the state expanded the sales tax to cover all manners of services, from lawyering to dog walking, and voters erupted in anger, ousting Democratic incumbents and propelling a Republican to the governorship. The same may happen in 2014. And I think that's what we're hearing from the tech industry. Lauren, if you could talk a little bit about what this tax means, to a business, and how they're going to have to deal with this, and when are they going to have to pay these taxes, and how are they going to have to keep track of it?
Okay. Well, it's going to impact not only the tech service industry, because they have to figure out what time is taxed, what time isn't taxed, because that's where the ambiguity comes across, that you don't know if it's gray areas as to what is taxed, what isn't. So they're going to have to take their time and divide it up when they're at a client or a customer, because they're not going to know. It may be that 5 minutes here has to do with the new software being loaded, but then the rest of it is troubleshooting. So they're going to have an accounting nightmare in order to record all of that. But the other businesses that are also going to be affected are the small business who can't afford to have an in-house IT department. they're not taxed. The larger companies are not taxed on this, so they don't have to worry about it. It's the small company that needs these services, because they can't do it themselves, but yet they can't have the in-service department. So for them, they have to be aware of what is taxable, what isn't, because if the IT person doesn't charge them for it, they could be audited in a sales tax audit or in a use tax audit, and maybe charged use tax where they were supposed to have had it withheld. So there's a lot of areas here that are involved. It's not just the accounting, it's just trying to figure out how do you keep track of this time. But as far as the tax itself, it is in effect for any service after July 31st. So it's on or after July 31st. So July 31st has to go in with August's sales tax. Okay, so that right there, and it was about a week that people had to know about this. So we're into it. This is August. So any services that are happening now, come September 20th, when the August sales tax is due, they're going to have to figure out how to do this. Some companies aren't even registered for a web file. So that means that once they find out about it, they've got to now register themselves on the web file, which takes a little while. So if they don't find out till September 15th, and oh my goodness, now I have to register on web file, they're not going to have the time to do it. So there's a lot of things involved with it.
There is a lot of things involved in it. Representative Gifford, if you could talk a little bit about how this came about, that it seems like we're all finding about this at the last moment, that it kind of got sprung on us.
Well, that's a classic Beacon Hill maneuver, first of all. The more that you can shield the general public from something coming their way that's not good, the better it is in general to get something passed. What happened here, again, is that I think, as Vinnie said, people were so focused on the huge package that Governor Patrick had initially put forward that when we actually were debating the smaller package, the $500 million tax package, that there was almost more focus directed on the gasoline tax increase, the cigarette tax increase, and hiding in there somewhere was this tech tax that, again, nobody knew much about, and people really didn't start asking questions until it was too late. And when we finally realized that, hey, this tax is going to go after the lifeblood of the Massachusetts economy, in essence. We are very dependent on the tech industry. In fact, a lot of people have referred to Massachusetts as the Eastern Silicon Valley. This is just incredibly detrimental, and it was almost like a sneak attack. And because it was, we're not voting for the governor's huge package. We're only going to vote for the $500 million. But people didn't realize that this tech tax was basically unchanged from what the governor's original recommendation was. And so, it's, as Vinnie said too, it's just sailed right through on a party line vote.
Yeah, it did seem to come as a surprise. I see Peter Foreman from the South Shore Chamber of Commerce in the audience. If you could just give a little bit of a comment at the mic about how the South Shore Chamber is dealing with this and how it's come towards your light. Thanks, Peter.
Sure. As the representative said, most people were focused on the larger issue of transportation funding, which we felt as a business community should take place, and this was a little piece of it. What the sneak attack seems to be is the growing expansion of the definitions in the bill, and that's even more frightening than the initial assumptions on the tax itself. One of the issues here that has caught the business community really by surprise, as much as it caught some legislators, is that the Department of Revenue applies different interpretations to what some of the words mean and what some of the definitions. So the legislature and the governor have found themselves in a situation of talking one language and then having the tax department interpret it in a very different way. Now, for the business community, there's a much larger issue here, and this is the camel's nose under the tent. That once you start opening the door to taxing professional services, the appetite on Beacon Hill to expand that to many other services is going to be even more detrimental than what is being looked at right now on the tech tax. So the business coalitions in the state, the business groups in the state are mounting an effort to repeal this. There is a ballot question, but frankly we don't want to wait until November of 2014. This really has to be either radically amended to bring it into a very narrow interpretation, or repealed outright, which would probably be the cleanest way to do this right now. And just wait for the legislature to get back in session and hope that legislative leaders realize the problem that this is creating.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, it really seems to have that slippery slope effect to it that once we start taxing tech people, what's to stop that, electrician and, tax accountants and et cetera. So, Dennis, I got an email blast from you this morning about the tech tax, and could you talk a little bit about how the Chamber is hearing about this, what the business community is talking about?
Sure, and it's a surprise to most small businesses. We have 800 members in the Chamber here in the Plymouth area, and it's a surprise to them that this tax is coming down. But we really don't know, as Peter mentioned, how deep this really goes, because there's just so many what-ifs involved in it. A small business owner who needs to install on 5 computers Microsoft Office, they're going to be paying a tax on the labor on that now, and that's a concern to small business owners. 85% of the Chamber members that are in our Chamber are below 20 employees. They're small business owners that have been struggling for 5 or 6 years now in this recession, and this is just another thing that's going to be on their plate and they're going to have to deal with monthly. Our other concern out of our office is, as an economic development organization, we're out there trying to attract companies to come back to Massachusetts. We're at 6 major shows in 2013, trying to bring technology companies back, medical device companies and others. One company that we've been working with was an Irish software firm. How does that impact our ability to bring companies back to Massachusetts? It's going to be a concern because we are already high in taxes, and this is just another one of those layers that we're going to have to deal with. Yeah, and I heard recently that the governor of Florida is trying to get people to move there, saying that they have less taxes than Massachusetts does. And that's really going to affect our businesses. If I could get one of the legislature to talk about the businesses in Massachusetts and how they see this is affecting, what their constituents are talking.
One of the main calls that I'm getting in my office over in Falmouth through the Upper Cape is, what are we being taxed on?
Yeah.
What is it? I've got the frequently asked questions from the Department of Revenue, but I still don't understand. One gentleman called last week and he said, I just want to do what's right, but I don't know what's right. And I'd harken back to think that we fought a revolution in this country about taxation without representation, and I think our new slogan should be no taxation without explanation. That if we expect our folks to pay a tax, it ought to be clear enough as to what we have as an expectation from them. But I think the irony in all of this is the day after we left Beacon Hill for our summer recess, the governor submitted a supplemental budget asking us to transfer $501 million into the savings account because of surplus revenue that we collected in fiscal year 13. This tax package is for $500 million. So I say we don't need to just repeal this tax. We need to put a hold on the entire tax increase, at least for fiscal year 14, because we have the revenue above the benchmark. It's in the coffers. The governor wants to put it away in his little savings account. I say we use that for our infrastructure investment this year, and we repeal these taxes, and then if we're going to come back in 2015 with a computer tax, then we can define it and have the Department of Revenue issue the regulations, the explanation, before the tax takes effect. And my colleagues and I had tried to get a vote on that to say until the Department of Revenue issues detailed regulations, the tax should not take effect. And again, we lost that vote on party lines. So this is, like I said, I'm hearing from all my businesses, we just want to do what's right. There's a whole other issue about us having a competitive advantage in the Commonwealth around the tech industry, and this is potentially putting us, neutralizing that or even giving us a competitive disadvantage.
The problem I see as a business owner is you can't know what's right. It's not that they haven't defined the rules, but that software by its nature isn't everything. Everything that's got an on-off switch has software in it. And there's no way that you're ever going to be able to draw a line and say, well, this thing is on one side of the line and this thing's on the other side of the line, without someone standing in the middle of that line saying, well, I don't know whether I should go left or go right. And that person is either going to assume they have to pay the tax, in which they'll lose the deal to the guy that decided they didn't have to pay the tax, or decide they won't pay the tax and then have the DOR breathing down their neck 3 years later with interest and penalties coming to take away their house. And it's the nature of software, that software is a global business and it's in everything. A local tax just can't work on a global industry. I mean, it's just nuts from the outset. I don't think it can be fixed.
And that's a good point, Peter. Chris,
I'd like to add to what you're just saying. I mean, one of the things about the software industry in general is that it's a lot different than many other industries. You work with a lot of consultants. It's a lot more worker flexibility. It's a little bit different industry than many other industries. I come from the financial services industry, and believe it or not, I'm one of the very few actually employed individuals from my company, and most of my software colleagues are actually contractors. Which is kind of interesting because this tax is a very confusing tax in how it affects how we design and develop software. I mean, typically what we do is, like, when we want to go and design a product, for example, we may actually hire a team to actually develop the UI, the user interface, like the website, for example. We may hire a company to actually design the mobile interface. And it's kind of my responsibility to kind of make sure I work with these teams and kind of interface with them and kind of build a whole monolithic project, out of the package. And to basically suggest that now we have to pay sales tax on each of those pieces of labor, we're just talking R&D, my friends here. We're not even talking about a sale. We're just talking about R&D. I mean, we haven't even sold any product yet. And this is very common that, maybe only 25% of the projects that you actually build actually make it to market. And it's very common to actually have a product that sits on the shelf for a bit internally for internal reasons, and maybe you use pieces of it later in the future. But I really think it's a whole different industry, and to impose a sales tax at each of those different points is just something completely uncompetitive. Here I thought California was being uncompetitive. Boy, we set a new definition, I got to tell you that. I mean, we really do. I mean, it's really a disappointment to see. But coming from the financial services industry also, and this is another interesting thing to point, Boston is the mutual fund capital of the world. And the reason why it is because we have a lot of endowments from basically wealthy individuals, universities, hospitals, and so you have a lot of money management, asset management firms here in this state, and they actually all involve IT's back-end services, back-end office systems. And once again, they hire consultants to do the accounting aspects of the software. So all you're going to do is just increase the cost, servicing costs, of financial servicing costs, and actually could price this important industry out of Massachusetts. And I think we have to, as a state, have to really rethink this over again. Thank you.
We've got a web guy in the audience. If he could come up and talk about how the web industry is going to be affected by this, I'd love to hear from him. It's interesting how the tech community is just finding out about this, and that we're starting to see a lot of tech industry people come out of the woodwork and be really upset about this. But if you could tell us a little bit about the web industry and how you see this affecting you.
Sure, and to second what you said, it seemed like it came out of nowhere the last month or two. Suddenly, everyone was talking about it on social networks, and I'm involved with the Cape Tech Council, and all these other organizations were suddenly saying, hey, this is happening, and I don't even know if we can stop it at this point. So it came out of nowhere, and the biggest frustration I see with most of the people I talk to is just the ambiguity. The frequently asked question list, I think, is at 55 now, and it's growing and growing because no one knows what should be charged, what shouldn't be charged. I own a small web agency on the Cape. It's 2 employees, and almost all my clients are other small companies. So if I'm bidding on a $5,000 web project, specifically against someone else that might use an open source project, it seems from the FAQs that I would need to charge tax if I use a licensed one. So now my price might be $300 higher than a competitor that's using an open source project. That's a car payment. That's a month of groceries for small businesses. So the whole open source thing is another real, quagmire of what is taxable, what isn't. If I chose to go with the $5,000 open source, solution for a client, but then I added a $10 plugin, it seems again from the FAQs that now that entire project is taxable. So I know other companies that make a living off selling small $10, $25 plugins for open source software. I might not use those services now because I know that a whole project will be taxable if I use that. So those people that make a living off those plugins or add-ons, features, might see a drop in their revenue of business as well. So the web agency is a very competitive market, as someone said, it's global. So the person that might now need to pay tax on a project might choose to do it themselves. There's a lot of do-it-yourself builders on there. They might choose to use a company outside of Massachusetts. So I think a lot of my specific clients are those small businesses that either need to be very aware of costs, and also the onus on me to now decide what is taxable, what isn't. I can't really outsource it to a tax accountant to have him consult for me. So now instead of focusing on what I do best, I'm also going to be putting on another hat of playing the tax person. So it's a lot of responsibility and prohibitive for me to continue to do business in a profitable manner.
It is. Thank you. And from what I see, that this is a real drain on smaller businesses. Peter, you had written me on one of your emails, the accounting part of this and what it's going to take. What do you estimate your time?
I want to go back to this point that he was saying about building a website, because I think it's even worse because you don't actually know if it's taxable until you get to into the weeds and decide which components need to be added. So you may go in and 6 months into a project, go in and say, oh, by the way, the whole project is taxable.
Right.
I forgot to mention, I didn't realize it. And that just makes the relationship with the customer very, very hard. I have a project, so we had this week notice, and so I was on the phone with my attorney and with my accountant trying to go over every single deal, and they disagree. They just disagree.
Your accountants do?
The accountant and the attorney disagree. Yep. Basically, with the accountant being more up to date on the FAQ and the attorney saying you just can't risk it. There's just too much personal liability involved. So on the margin, you just got to be safe. And the accountant saying, well, I'm trying to read between the lines. Nothing's said here. I think it is not possible. It isn't. Software is in everything. Let me give you, so you guys do TV. So you can imagine someone comes in and they want an ERP system.
Right.
Well, clearly taxable. But what if I wanted a video surveillance system in my facility? Well, if I install the software, taxable. If I go and buy a lot of TiVos, not taxable. So where's the line? Right? Each thing that you can imagine, there's a line where you could say, well, if I squinted it this way, it's one on one side, the other way it's that side. We figure it's a full-time person doing compliance. And I'm largely 80% of my business is unaffected. I do a lot of custom software, and largely we think we're not getting killed. But we still need a compliance person to look at this. And we're really scared of the companies out of the state that don't know. Like, we're learning all about this thing here. But there's an awful lot of national and international companies that aren't paying attention. They just know Massachusetts tax. And they have nexus in Massachusetts, and they just, so if I do a deal in California, better yet, Atlanta, for a big soft drink manufacturer, is that deal taxable? I don't know.
And it's from the FAQs I've seen, you're responsible for your vendors. Yeah. And your vendors' vendors and your vendors' vendors' vendor.
you just want to. It even drives me even nutty too. Is that we talk about contractors, how we hire contractors. We have what we call source control, and just to let the public know what source control is, it's basically a repository of where your current project state is. It contains all the source code for your project, and believe it or not, we have people all around the world, that are part of our organization, as well as consultants that we've hired in other companies that may have limited access to pieces of that source code that are constantly checking in and checking out pieces of that product. We don't keep track of who made changes to what or what's been being changed, and there's no way you can, especially if you start talking about open source. It's not even possible. There's not even any mechanism to even do that. And so, I think that's another example of where government just kind of really maybe not have understood. And
it's not implementable.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It simply is not.
Someone brought up the creeping tax about how this applies to other services. You don't even have to go that far. Under this legislation, all you have to do is redefine the word software, and all of a sudden that electrician that's programming that smart light switch is software, and the car mechanic that's fixing your emissions, software, and the guy who's setting up your television and configuring your DVR is software, and the person who replaces the board in your microwave oven, it's software. I mean, software is literally everywhere, and this is, it's just way out of control.
If you look at a lot of the blogs and in the line, a lot of the representatives are saying, wow, this wasn't what we realized. And this is much broader. They could have asked, and it is interesting because a lot of the places are saying, well, they put this law into effect. They didn't talk to us tech people, and
the first I heard about it was in mid-July. Yeah, and it was this thing was coming down, and all of a sudden we had to start implementing. And I have friends who are sole proprietors. I have one good friend who does, she's an MBA and she does analytics for one of the universities. And so, is that taxable? She does a little web interface for them. I have no idea. I know that she doesn't even know the tax is there. Right. Doesn't even know how to apply it. And doesn't. I mean, right.
Those small businesses are the ones that are really getting crushed by this. Representative Hunt, you're an accountant as well. The DOR seems as confused or more confused than we do about this. Could you speak about how the DOR has to implement this and has to watch it and collect these taxes? How are they going to do it if they don't know?
Well, it's a great question. A couple of these things tie together. One is on August 20th, we come out with another draft pronouncement of the rules. These are called TIRs by the Department of Revenue. This is so that people can respond to what they are planning to do as regulations on this bill. As quickly as they could get out regulations, they did, but they augmented that with this question, this FAQ page, and the questions and answers, last time I looked, were over 70 of them, with all kinds of situations there. That is not the way to implement a bill. Now, as far as awareness goes, I think there's something to be said here, too. This tax was in the governor's budget that was released in January. The High Tech Council for Massachusetts was aware of it. They wrote a letter to Brian Dempsey, who is the chairman of the Ways and Means in the House, and Vinny, you sit on that board, on that committee as well. But the letter was written in such a way that it was actually used by the chairman of Ways and Means on the floor to say, these people support this tax. Now, did they? The answer was no. In fact, I got up after that and I read the rest of the letter. The rest of the letter said, this is a bad idea. The beginning of the letter said, thank you so much for only taxing us $500 million instead of $2 billion. And that was taken as, oh, we acquiesced to this deal. So the awareness was there. I'd have to say the High Tech Council dropped the ball on this. There's no question about that. I don't want to attack anybody in particular, but they were asleep at the wheel. And then the other thing I would say is this. It's unfair in several ways. Just to attack this sector in and of itself is unfair. And because of the interpretations that are going around, it's unfair to even try and make the sector try and comply to the implementation is going to be crazy. But why this sector? And what worries me is, and Peter Foreman said earlier, and some other people here too, it's a slippery slope. It's a Pandora's box. And what happens is, because it's a tax on the IT sector, that will be the reason people will argue that we need to expand the sales tax in other sectors, because it's unfair to only tax the IT sector. That will be the talking point when we come around the corner and start taxing other areas.
Yeah, it does seem that these businesses are going to be effective. Dennis, do you have any implications or any stats on how this is going to affect businesses across our region?
I think that the small business owners, we're representing mostly small business owners on the South Shore, but it's going to trickle down, I think, to all of those businesses, from your very large software companies right down to the small business who's installing software on their computers for 1 or 2 employees in the office. And we don't know where it's going to end. And I think that's the biggest concern that small businesses are facing today. There's just one constant tax after another, or there's another fee or another permit that's needed. Whether you're in the development side or the small business service side, there's a constant growing feeling that you're going to be taxed right around the corner for something different. And we hear the implications of, if you start here, you're going to be down the line, having someone repairing your microwave, and you're going to be taxed again. I just don't think there's any end to it unless we finally put up a wall and say, this is where we're drawing the line in the sand. We can't afford any more taxes in Massachusetts. We have to continue to grow as an economy and not be held back by more and more taxes.
Do you see businesses in Massachusetts moving out?
I don't think they'll move out, but I think you're going to see that scale where they're going to make up for it somewhere. We've seen it over the last 5 years in this economy. They're not hiring people, or they're scaling back. They're hiring part-time people instead of full-time people. This all affects our economy in many different ways. And people are going to pay their bills first, and they're going to worry about growing their business second. And that's the thing that's going to be concerning to most of us. We're not going to grow our economy like we would like to.
Yeah.
It's concerning, and I think for Peter and for chambers of commerce like ours and across the state, we've had a success in having our chambers band together, creating thousands of businesses that are going to repeal something like this and fight this type of tax increase.
Yeah. Peter, you had mentioned to me that you're not necessarily moving out of state, but your business model is changing.
Yeah, well, first of all, I live in Massachusetts. I've been here since the 80s. I'm a homeowner, I'm a business owner. My children in public school. I'm not going anywhere. The issue is that 6.25% might seem like it's a small number, but it's a huge number. I win or lose deals on 5%. I make 10% at the end of the year. I did a calculation that on $100,000 of business, I'm paying something like $30,000 in taxes, all into the federal and the state, and everything is done on the margin. You don't decide to move because of one thing. You don't decide to hire someone because of one thing. But everything's done on the margin. So on the margin, one extra project makes you profitable or makes you unprofitable. On the margin, you decide to hire one person or decide not to hire one person. So the risk right now is lining up that I only do, 15-20% of my business in Massachusetts. Most of it's out of the state or global. And I almost never compete with anybody local. I compete with companies from Germany and companies from around the world. But I'm looking and I'm saying, on the margin, I think my business in Massachusetts is going to shrink. I'm more worried about the global companies doing business in Massachusetts than I am about the actual legality of the tax. And I've begun reducing headcount by attrition. We're not going to do anything anything drastic. Maybe next week I'll get a big project and I'll change my mind. But but everything is on the margin. And right now, boy, we grew 30% last year. And this year I'm saying, let's not hire in Massachusetts.
And it does seem like, when you're talking about the economy in general, it does seem that it's more like consumer confidence, have you, that, you're not necessarily going to, lose business or move, but you're not going to hire that extra person.
On the margin, I'm hiring people in California or in, well, it turns out Des Moines, Iowa. I could really use a good guy. I'm looking for people in various places.
Yeah.
Massachusetts is an expensive place to do business anyway.
Right.
The reason you're here is because there's a lot of really talented people, and because there's businesses. You can do local business with local companies. But if you can't do the local business with the local companies, you might as well hire people in India.
Right. So, Vinny, how afraid are you of this tax just being another load on the economy and Massachusetts having a problem with this and businesses in general?
The money's bad enough, the fact that we're going to, some people say $160 million, some people say $500 million in taxes. That's bad enough. But I really do think it's going to affect jobs. I think Massachusetts, we are actually seeing our unemployment rate go up right now. And when things seem to be getting better, our unemployment rate is increasing. I just think this sends another terrible message about Massachusetts not being pro-business, not encouraging people. Listen, I believe the best thing you can do for someone is allow them to get a job. We want to encourage job growth, and when you encourage job growth, they have their own jobs. I mean, let's face it, Massachusetts. We just saw recently, Massachusetts is known for other things than job growth. It's one of the best places to go if you want to be on the welfare system. That's not the message that we want to send. We want to send, this is the best place to come to do business, so that these companies that we're talking about here want to grow in Massachusetts. And when they grow, guess what? We all do well. And we all have, we have our own little world. We have our jobs.
Trickle down.
And we build our homes, and we grow. And because we're building our homes, we keep the plumbers and electricians busy. That's the message we want to send. And I think consistently we're kind of going back to that Taxachusetts that everyone used to talk about. I think we moved away. We're starting to move back there with a whole host since with the governors, since he's been here. How many different taxes has he proposed or actually implemented since he's been here? And I think that sends a bad message to the business community in the whole. And that's our concern, I think, as a whole.
One of the things I wanted to add, too, is probably one of the most single worst deterrents to small business coming to Massachusetts is tax uncertainty, where it changes from year to year. We've been dealing with that for many years to begin with. Now, with this new tech tax, and we've talked about it here, about we didn't even know what was in the bill till we passed it. Where have I heard that before? But I won't go there. But I mean, that's all about making this a good place for businesses to locate. And I personally have received some emails from people who are considering seriously moving their software businesses to Rhode Island. I mean, I believe that's a serious
But they still get that
threat.
tax if they do any business with anybody in Massachusetts.
Correct.
According to DOR.
They don't have to collect it.
But it's the other guy's problem then.
Right.
And you're not personally liable anymore. No, really. These are very, very big things. If you're the two-man shop, this is
Oh, yeah.
The six, what I was trying to say about the 6.25% when I only make on deals that are 5% deals, it changes the physics. It changes the calculus of the whole business model.
The
changes
dynamics of it.
Because that profit margin is the same as saying between projects, how long can I keep a guy before I lay him off? Right. I mean, so when you reduce that profit margin in half, you really have to. You give me a fast trigger. I just don't have a choice.
And it is, speaking from my point of view, with a one-man shop, it's extremely difficult.
You can't lay yourself off.
Right, I can't lay myself off. That is one thing. I can make myself work harder, though.
That's right.
But it's extremely difficult for me to run that fine line when it comes to the taxes on this. Lauren, what do I do? You know, what can I, you know, do I just start taxing anything that I think possibly could be taxed, or do I?
Well, the worst thing you want to do is tax everything, because now your client, customer, could say, hey, that wasn't taxable, and now you're liable for that.
Right.
It's brought to court because, you know, and you're fined and all of that. No, there has to be a way of keeping track of it. I wanted to mention one of those facts, that 70 some odd faxes I was reading through. Number 45 asks about that when an IT person, a tech person goes into a customer and they're doing different things for that customer. Some of it could be taxable, some of it isn't. And this was the DOR's answer about that. It says, while the services of integrating a third-party software product into a company's software would generally be taxable, there's an exception where taxable services are bundled with non-taxable services. So they say that if the value of the taxable service is inconsequential, which with this meaning it means it's valued at less than 10% of the total sale, and that the value is determined in good faith, and the service provider is not the vendor of the taxable pre-written software or product being integrated into the customer's software, then that 10% is not taxable. So how are you going to
Thanks for answering my question.
Yeah, that's right from the
It means
deal.
that every auditor on every deal is going to make a decision.
It means that they're going to need, we need to know. So I cannot advise my clients how to account for this, because I don't know what the DOR is going to be looking for when they go to audit this.
I also saw that
What is the
design
proof?
services were even taxable, which is really mind-boggling, because, and this is what typically happens before we begin any software product, is typically you go on a whiteboard session, and typically what will happen is you may work with consulting firms to kind of figure out how this system may integrate into your system, you know, before you even start the process. You know, involves some sort of flow chart, some sort of whiteboard. So what are we going to do, tape these meetings or something like to determine whether or not that's a taxable event? I mean, seriously. I mean, you know, it's absolutely crazy. I mean, everything from enhancements, just even business analyst aspects of it. I mean, what, just coming up with what, a BRD document or just a flow document is it considered a taxable event? I mean, it just, to me, is a very convoluted. Very convoluted.
It is, because I was looking through the FAQs and it was saying that I do a lot of monthly maintenance where I go in and take care of. That's not taxable.
Right.
And I was scared to death that my backup software was going to be taxable, but that's not taxable. I'm like, great, why is that not taxable? I'm not going to ask, but I don't want to go there. But it really seems like the DOR is they're sitting there going, I don't know. They really don't. These FAQs are like, oh, sure, whatever. So Vinny, you got to school me on politics here. How does this bill come about when, you know, it really, in the back end, the DOR really doesn't know how to do it, and you know the businesses really don't know what to do, and when a law comes into, or a tax or a bill comes up, this is one of the minor details that kind of gets overlooked. How does this, you know?
You know, I wish I had an answer for you on how this happened, because we all took the floor and said, how can we do this? We talked about these issues. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, you know, the legislature's just shocked. We were saying, we don't know how these things are going to be implemented. What are the implications? Define this. Why are we leaving it for Department of Revenue to make, you know, determinations on what it is? There's so much subjectivity on the Department of Revenue side, and if you're a business, and I happen to have a small business, that's my biggest fear, is that, you know, maybe I did something wrong, and you know, you don't find out for a year, year and a half, 2 years later. Well, guess what? It's not just the tax you're paying, it's the interest and penalties, and it's that whole procedure of being audited that many businesses are very concerned about. So they're going to try to do what they're going to just tax everything. I just had to do a software maintenance, or basically I have a maintenance contract with my computer system that I have at my gas station. And before that, this was like July 18th. before the tax was even implemented, they taxed me the $1,200 that service contract cost because they didn't know, and obviously you pay it but they're nervous about making sure they tax something. I don't know that should be taxed because it's a maintenance contract. It's not really software. However, that's what's going to happen, and you're going to see so many companies taxing everything because of fear, not because they don't, it's right or wrong. It's because they don't want to not do it and then get hit after the fact, which is interest and penalties. And anyone who's ever been hit by the IRS or the Department of Revenue knows that that's so far worse than the taxes are, and that's the other concern that I think you're going to see happening.
I would have charged you less. So
pitch, right?
Yeah. So what can you, the general public, do about this? And one of the first things that I think we are doing is across the state, we're having these roundtable discussions, and we're getting together and talking to everybody about the taxes. What's the chamber doing about this? And where are you going with this? Are you alerting people? Are you letting people know? And
we did. We sent out an email blast today, which has gone out to a couple thousand businesses throughout the region. It will have posted on our website the important facts about this bill, and also who you can contact to sign on to petitions, speak to the legislators, and get the information out there so that people can start mustering some support to repeal this.
Peter, is the South Shore doing anything about this?
Similar work.
Peter Foreman from the South Shore Chamber is going to have a couple words about this.
We're working with the business coalitions across the state and talking to legislators, and when there is a specific proposal ready to go, urging our members to contact their legislators to get behind that.
Great, thank you. What are you guys doing?
Well, one thing I did want to bring up in people wanting to pay tax on something where they're not even sure that they know the tax, and I think that Randy can probably answer this question, but once your money goes to DOR, good luck getting it back. I mean, that's a very frightening thing for a small business.
Believe me.
The black hole.
It is. Yeah. There is a way, and there's an abatement form that you can file to do that, but it's a hassle and it takes forever. And they have people with stacks of paper 3 feet tall on their desks, so good luck trying to get something back in a timely fashion.
Well, that was kind of what I was afraid of. But, I mean, it just makes sense.
So you guys are talking to your constituents. We're hoping that, there's going to be a repeal. Is there anything else that the legislature is doing?
I mean, the immediate piece is to try to get a repeal of it, whether it be through an independent bill, if there's enough will to go that way. I know our caucus will be vigilant to try to attach a repeal to any piece of legislation that it would be deemed in order to have a debate on it and have a roll call, and to force a roll call so that if they voted for it one time, they're going to vote for it again, or they're going to vote to repeal it. If you say you didn't know about it before, well, you know about it now. Get on the phones, call your reps, make sure they know about it. So when these amendments come up and they vote against this amendment to repeal, they can't claim, like they did last time, oh, I didn't know about it. We need to make sure they know about it. And then we'll continue our efforts with outside organizations to get the signatures, to get it on the ballot if necessary. If we can't get the political will in this session, with what's left with the session, then we will make it a political issue in the 2014 election, put it on the ballot, and ask the people of the Commonwealth to repeal it.
Peter, you had a couple of websites that you could go to, or a couple of things.
Yeah, first of all, thank you for the roundtable and for for bringing this and for putting it on to the cable access. This is a really good way to begin. The Chamber of Commerce is all over are working this. You mentioned the Mass High Tech Council. I agree that they weren't very vocal in the beginning, but right now I think they are pushing hard and are working hard on those editorials. You read one from the New York Times. There's a lot. I mean, from the Boston Globe. There's a lot of editorials, and they're all falling in favor of repeal. There are things. I'm working with business owners around the state, and business leaders around the state. If you go to easy way to get in touch with us, if you go to Twitter and you look at hashtag techtax or Facebook or LinkedIn, there are repeal the techtax groups on Facebook, LinkedIn, and there's conversations every day. You just click on almost any of those, and it'll start to bring you into the community of people that are talking about this privately. There's also the Mass Taxpayers Foundation. I know they're doing a lot on the issue. And the main thing is right now we're focusing on a write-in campaign. Write your state legislators. Call them. These guys will tell you the best way to nudge them rather than me. But we've been told to tell people to write, so I'm trying to get as many people to write letters as we can.
This week, as we speak, we're actually, the Republican caucus has 8 of these roundtables going on all this week around the state, trying to get the information out there, trying to do everything we can to work towards repeal. We fought it then. We weren't successful. We're going out to the public. We're going to do whatever we can to repeal this because we really do believe it's going to have a very detrimental effect on our economy. And the only way we can do it is to go around the process that legislatively. Obviously, there aren't enough Republicans in the legislature to have stopped it at the time. We're going to the people. I believe when people understand the implications of this, Republican or Democrat, independent, they understand that this is bad for Massachusetts. And we're going to get out there and we're going to lead the charge and we're going to do whatever we can to try to stop this. So thank you all for taking part in this because this is the only way that we can do it. We're out there fighting, but we need other people to back us up and try to get the word out.
And you can see through the internet that there's a lot of people who are becoming involved with this that have just found out about it. And this is America where we the people are supposed to be able to come up with an issue and show our concerns and bring them to our legislature, bring them to you guys. And I think these roundtables are a great way to get it. Lauren, just quickly, is there anything tax-wise that you would suggest small businesses do? Please help me.
For now, until it's repealed, this was in effect as of July 31st. So any services provided on July 31st on. So now we're into August. August, it's the sales tax is due September 20th, okay? And so you have to include July 31st with that.
So basically start collecting taxes.
Yeah.
Well, can I say one thing about Peter's comment?
Sure.
Write your legislator. I got an email today. I thought it was perfect. The subject line, tech tax. The body, no.
Great. Can it really be that simple, or do we have? Because we've been writing a lot of letters.
Absolutely, we keep track of all of those communications.
That's right.
Just to reiterate, I have been personally calling even the other legislators that actually even vote in opposite of it, actually here on the South Shore. Some have returned my phone calls, and some haven't. But I think we definitely do have to continue that pressure because, as you stated, Representative Demasito, I mean, you're right. You're in the minority, and it is going to take a coalition of people to repeal this bill. So that's very important.
And I think that's the biggest thing is that we really need to call our legislatures, write our legislators, or yell it from the rooftop. And I think that the tech industry has started to do it, but I think that roundtables like this are going to get the word out there. I'd like to thank everybody in this roundtable for coming. I'd like everybody in the legislature to keep fighting the good fight and know that we're behind you. And out there in technology world, don't be afraid of technology. Make sure that you know about technology, and please keep showing up. I'm Wrestling Brewster from Brewster PC Solutions, and this has been Wrestling with Computers. Thank you for showing up.